We'll get into the feature set in just a second, but just respect the size. All right, people, I'm Garrett. This is Making Movies, and today we are going to be talking about monitors. You should never, under any circumstance, regardless of the camera, trust the little screen on the back. That screen is good for things like accessing menus and understanding basic composition and framing. That is about it. You can't really trust the color on them. You can't really trust the size of them to be able to pull accurate focus. And you know exactly what I'm talking about if you have gone and shot a production and everything looked great on the tiny little screen, and then when you got home, everything was either super soft or underexposed or overexposed, or there were things in the frame that you didn't know were there or didn't see in the moment. And that is why you would use a monitor. And there are things that go into monitors that make them better than other monitors, or things that you should look for when buying a monitor. And those are the things I want to talk to you about today, specifically through the lens of this monitor. This is the Feelworld F6 Plus. It is a 5.5 inch touch screen field monitor. We'll get into what all of that means. There's a lot to this, so we'll dive right in, starting with the things that I like. Right off the bat, this is a 5.5 inch monitor, making it slightly bigger than most of its competitors, which would fall into the 5 inch range. And this being 5.5 or 5.5 makes it just slightly bigger than a 5 inch, which I really do like. We have 3/4 20 mounts, one on the bottom, one on the side, and one on the top. On the side here, we have our HDMI ports, and you will see that we have both HDMI in and out. Now, that makes this a loop-through monitor, or a looping monitor, meaning that you can chain other things off of this. The same video signal that goes into this comes out of this, and that becomes very helpful if you're doing things like wireless video transmission, right? I have my camera, I have the monitor, that way I can see what it is that I need to see, but then I have a wireless transmitter that sends it off to Video Village or a director's monitor or what have you. And if I have only an HDMI in, that makes this an endpoint and I can't plug anything else into it. And if your wireless transmitter is also an endpoint, then you have to choose whether you're going to be looking at a good size monitor or Video Village is going to be looking at a good size monitor, and you don't get to have both. And that, honestly, even if you don't need it right now, is a way to help future-proof you as you grow your kit. Underneath that, you will see that it has a DC out 8 volt, meaning that you can then of course power other things. So if you wanted to run power to your camera from this, you have that ability, which is another very, very cool thing. Across the bottom, you will see that there is an SD card slot. We'll talk more about that here in a little bit, but very cool. DC power in. This means that you can either plug this into a wall via just a standard 12 volt barrel port, or if you're running universal power, this gives you the ability to plug this monitor directly into that power source via barrel port, and then of course power this then in turn off of that universal power supply. And then a headphone jack, another really key feature I like about this, because of course HDMI not only carries video signal but audio signal as well, and I can monitor that audio with headphones right here. This guy ships with a standard arm. You've probably seen something like this before. This is made entirely out of metal, which is very cool. It's got 1/4 20 here, and it has a cold shoe mount down here at the bottom. So you would just take this guy. I don't know if you can see this here. Let's see if we can zoom in. Can you? There you go. See how they've got these little dots on either side of this 1/4 20? On this, you'll also see those same mounting dots here, and what that gives you the ability to do is when you attach the monitor, it has a fixed position. This is super cool because when you screw this thing on, it then has a place to lock into. One of the great things about this is that this is a toolless arm, meaning that once I have this tightened down, I then have the ability to adjust my tilt position without having to screw and unscrew this guy. It's all set in one tension, and I have the ability to move it accordingly. Really sweet feature. On the back, an amazing, well thought through battery plate here. There are 2 main batteries that most often get used with accessories. That is the Canon LPE6 and the Sony L battery. I don't know why they're called L batteries, because their actual battery number is NPF, whatever. And those will look something like this. This is a Canon LPE6 battery. This would be things like in most of your mid-range Canon cameras and a lot of accessories. And then this one is a Sony L battery. This battery comes in varying sizes, starting with something kind of small like this, and I think they actually go a little smaller, something probably in that range, all the way up to really, really thick suckers, which I believe are like the NPF 970s or 975s. This is kind of a mid-range one, which is really great, but this plate works for both, and the way that it works, you'll see that on the one side we have these two gold pins, and on the other side we have these two silver contacts. This is for your LPE6 side, this is for your Sony L side, and they are labeled for us on both sides so we can tell which one is which. But if I have a whole bunch of these Sony L batteries, I can sit here, plug it in, we're off to the races. It has this little push to eject button, slides out like so. Same goes for these. If you're somebody who's rocking a whole bunch of these Canon batteries, you take this, go to the other side, punch it in, slide it in, ready to rock and roll. Again, push the button, slide to eject. That's how it works. The fact that both batteries are supported by one plate and you don't have to either order one or the other or have like a screw-on adjustable plate is a really, really sweet and well thought out feature. We talked a little bit about this. This is the cold shoe mount. This is how you would mount this onto your camera because this monitor doesn't weigh very much. It doesn't put a whole lot of strain on the hot shoe of your camera like this. Look at the size difference between these two monitors. I understand that this is a very tiny camera, but this is a pretty standard screen size, somewhere between 3 and 3.5 inches here, whereas a 5.5 inch monitor is significantly bigger, allowing us to see a lot more of what our camera sees and give us more clarity, detail, understanding, all of that. We'll get into the feature set in just a second, but just respect the size. Because we're now using this hot shoe, they have given us a cold shoe on the side here. So if you're rocking something that looks like this or this, you're not out of luck. You can still mount them like so. HDMI here, and I have mini HDMI here, and just like that, we are now rock and roll. You of course could get longer cables if you wanted. I like having super short cables. This works the perfect length. I have the ability to do whatever it is that I want. Another accessory I want to bring up is that it does come with a sunshade or a sun hood. It comes in two pieces, so it has this frame here, just kind of a thin plastic frame with these little nubbins on them. And that then of course attaches onto the top and the bottom of our monitor like so. And then it comes with this collapsible sun hood. I love the fact that this is collapsible, that I can fold it out and fold it down as I need to. Some of the other monitors that I've used that have sun hoods have a fixed plastic sun hood, and it becomes a pain to try to figure out how to pack something that's shaped like this that can't move, especially when it's deep. And speaking of depth, this is a very good sized sun hood here. It has really nice matte black kind of felt, it almost feels like, on the inside, again, to kind of absorb light and not reflect it. And then it has this soft Velcro strip here, which is really good for attaching it. That said, this plastic bit doesn't come with the hard part of Velcro, or what I think is called male Velcro. I think it's male and female. I don't know why, that makes no sense. But the hard part of Velcro versus the soft part of Velcro, this comes with the soft part. That doesn't come with the hard part. It's not difficult. I mean, I just cut some strips of it and put it here, and it works great. And then you can just sit here, put this guy on like so, just like this. And now I have a really sweet sun hood. Just take the Velcro off, like that. I can pack this down nice and flat, and then I'm back ready to go. Next is the way that this monitor functions. Across the top here, because I forgot, we have the power button, also a touch lock button. We'll get to that in a second. And then we have a menu scroll wheel right here. So those are what we have across the top. If I press and hold the power button, you will then see this guy then comes to life like so. All right, let's see if I could do this here kind of backwards here. So if we double tap anywhere here on the monitor, it will bring up our full menu. And you'll see here, the top one looks like a picture, the middle one looks like crosshairs, the third one looks like whatever it looks like. We'll start at the top here. So the top one looks like a photo. We tap this. This gives us a whole bunch of our monitor display options. Histogram, focus assist, audio metering, zebras, monochrome, false color. All very, very great features to have in this, especially things like false color, which are great for finding and getting proper exposure. And it does display an exposure key across the bottom, so you can interpret which colors are at which exposure level. Histogram's pretty self-explanatory, another really great way of understanding kind of where our exposure is at and where our total contrast is in our image. Audio metering, I don't feel like I need to explain because it meters your audio, right? It's the way that we can monitor our audio, see if we're peaking or not peaking or what have you, which is great. Zebras, again, help you with your exposure. They let you know if anything is too far overexposed or if it's being blown out. Monochrome is a great way of helping to understand how to pull proper focus, especially if you're using focus assist. Next is focus assist, which of course gives you the ability to see what is exactly tack sharp in your frame by showing things with a singular color around them. And if we enable it, you'll then see that we then get the option of what we want the sensitivity of that focus peaking to be, as well as what color we want it to represent. The next icon down, we then have safety marker, center marker, marker matte, and marker color. Our safety markers give us the ability to set it, I believe it goes 70%, 80%, 90%, and then different aspect ratios, 69, 16:10, 4:3, 5:4, so on and so forth. So there's all these different ones. And what that is used for is that if our camera only shoots in 16:9, for instance, but we know that after the fact we're going to reframe it, whether we're going to crop it down, we're going to put it in a different sequence setting, or we're going to be putting kind of bars across the top and bottom, having a display overlay that allows us to see that gives us the ability to frame properly for what our final export's going to be. Center marker just puts a marker in the center. And this little crosshair is really good for understanding exactly what your center frame is. The reason why you would need something like that is that if we're trying to line something up like a Wes Anderson shot where we really need good symmetry, or we want to know whether we're really in 1/3 or another third, just having a simple reference in the middle gives us the ability to really line things up with precision. Next, of course, is marker matte. Marker matte, very similar to safety markers. Instead of giving us a line around it, what it's going to do is it's going to gray things out. We'll go to our different aspect ratios. We'll start with 16:9, but then if I go to 4:3, you'll see how it jumps to kind of a square rendition here. Just like if I go to 185 or 235, it starts to give me that letter boxing, and then I can adjust the intensity of that gray, whether I want it to be completely blacked out or if I want it to just be a very light overlay. And then of course, the marker color is for what our safety marker is. The next one down, which has this magnifying glass on it, gives us a whole bunch of options of how we are actually using our monitor. If we want to underscan or overscan, if we have an aspect ratio in mind we want to display it as. These things all have very specific individualized uses. I don't use these things very often, but if you find yourself in a position where that makes sense to you, good for you. You'll probably know why you need that. Then we get to the RGB icon. The RGB icon gives us a whole new set of features. The top one is LUTs. This is where this SD card slot comes in handy, which would be something like this is an SD card, goes in this SD card slot. And the nice thing is that you can load LUTs directly onto the SD card, load the SD card into here, and then I can say I want to have LUTs on. It has LUTs built in, which are going to be standard. It has S-Log2, S-Log3, Log-C, V-Log, just kind of all of the standard LUTs, and that's great. But let's say that you have a specific LUT for a look that you want. You can load that onto this SD card. To load that in, we then have this LUT import SD. Once you've loaded it in, it will stay in here. But if you have a new LUT that you want to load in, you put the SD card in, go to this LUT import SD, turn that on. It will then scan your card, grab that, throw it back in. And then as you're cycling through these LUTs, you then come across whatever it is that you've loaded in here, which is a super, super helpful function, especially if you know what you want the end color to pretty much look like. The next thing underneath it is it then also has a color temperature readout where you can then change the Kelvin value of the color temperature. I don't know exactly why you would use this on the monitor versus in the camera, because you should be white balancing in your camera. I guess if you had a LUT that worked only specifically with one type of Kelvin value, but then you still should be doing that. I don't know. You have the option to adjust the Kelvin readout or the Kelvin value of what it's seeing. I don't know why you'd use it, but you know, if you know why, go ahead and tell me. That'd be great. We then have our standard screen options here as far as backlight goes, brightness, contrast, saturation, that kind of stuff. All of that's there, which is wonderful. I tend to kind of leave that alone unless I'm actually going to go through and seriously calibrate this monitor, which I don't really have a need to. The last one is this gear here at the bottom, and that of course gives us what the wheel controls, what language this is in, our transparency, time, volume, reset, firmware updates, all of that stuff. You again would update the firmware with the SD card as well. And then the back arrow will take you back out to this main screen. Now, if you don't want to have to get into all of that to adjust those settings, they do have a quick menu, and the way that you do that is you swipe up from the bottom like so, and then it gives us a whole bunch of options here, and I can just single touch any of these. There's our false color. Single tapping will get us out of that. The last kind of key function on this that I want to talk about is across the top here. Our power button seconds as a touch lock button. So if I have all the settings that I want in and I don't want it changing things if I accidentally press the monitor, I single press that and you'll see here touch off. Now that we've gone over the function of this monitor, I want to talk about some of the things that I'm not seeing that I wish I did. It's really great to have a histogram in this monitor because that is very helpful for setting exposure, but it's not as good for video as something like a waveform would be. Now, that's something that I feel you could adjust with a firmware update to put waveforms on here, whether that's RGB Parade or just your standard waveforms, but that would be much more helpful for me in understanding exposure. Histograms are more of a photo thing, waveforms are far more helpful for video, so if that was something that I could have in here, I would really like that. Another thing that I'm not a huge fan of is that this LED light is always on. So you'll see here the camera's off, the monitor is off, but this little red LED light is always on. And then when I power everything on, that just goes from red to green. And it's surprisingly bright LED, and I don't really ever want that. I know when the monitor is off or when it's on because the screen is on or off. Again, that's something I feel like you could fix in a firmware update and it would be super helpful. Also because having a light on is going to continue to drain the battery even when the monitor isn't on, even if it's, you know, an infinitesimal amount. The only other thing I can say about this is that the brightness of this monitor leaves something to be desired. I think it's about 500 nit. I wasn't even using this outdoors. If I was, of course, I would use the sun hood, which it's great that it comes with, but even in the studio, the monitor on the back of my camera was brighter than this monitor. And it's not so dark that it's like unusable by any means. It's still a very usable monitor, but I would love to see a little bit more punch coming out of that. For $230, Feelworld really knocked it out of the park with this. I love the size, I love the functionality, I love the feature set that it comes with. There's a lot of really good engineering that's gone into this, and honestly, my main issues with this can be fixed with firmware. I'm hoping it can get fixed. But all in all, I mean, you're getting a lot of really pro-end specs for not a pro-end price tag. Between the HDMI looping here, where we've got the HDMI out, you have the headphone volume control here, you can load LUTs into it, save the LUTs in. It has a two-way battery slot depending on what type of battery that you want. It has a really solid metal arm that has the cold shoe here. It's lightweight, durable. I like this thing. This thing is really cool. And I don't think for the price tag you're gonna find something that has all of the features that this does. So good on you, Feelworld. Thank you so much for sending this thing to me. And that's it. Those are my thoughts on this monitor. If you use Feelworld products or have used this monitor before, I'd love to know your thoughts on it. Is there anything that I missed? Is there anything that you like that I don't, or vice versa? Anyway, if you found this video helpful, please do me a favor, give this thing a like. If you want to see more stuff like this, do me two favors. Push subscribe. I'm pushing subscribe on you now, but push subscribe and then also hit that bell icon. Push the bell icon. I don't know why, but do it. Okay? And as always, I will see you in the next episode.